Welcome to episode 33 of AuthentiCity FM. I'm joined as always by my co-hosts and friends, Phil Corrali and Corey Spiegel. I'm Mike Sable, and I am delighted to bring forward this guest this week. If you have ever wondered how Tony Nathan, Lake Michigan, Elmer's Glue, Nordstrom's, Field Day, and Gabby Douglas all fit to describe our next guest, stick around. We'll see you on the other side. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are so thrilled to have our next guest. So a little bit of explanation is in order. So Tony Nathan is a famous running back from the University of Alabama in the mid 70s. And Alabama is known for having its world famous coach, Bear Bryant, who always wore this sort of houndstooth cap. And our next guest is a Bama alum. If you've ever wondered about Lake Michigan, of course, I always think of Lake Michigan. I don't think of Chicago. I actually think of Milwaukee. If you think about Milwaukee, you think about Harley Davidson. Our next guest is a Harley rider. If you're wondering about Elmer's Glue, that's a thing that connects stuff. And in our profession, what we do is we build community and we connect things together. And Elmer's Glue is one of those things that's a great connector, as is our next guest. Nordstrom's stands alone as one of these things. It is the pinnacle of customer service. Our next guest is customer focused always. Field Day, you've heard us talk about it on the show. Field Day is this thing where everybody got a trophy. Our next guest has the opposite opinion, which is not everybody deserves a trophy. And the way that you don't get trophies is you have to measure stuff. And so you've got to be data driven. And that is that. And then lastly, Gabby Douglas, of course, a world famous gymnast, and she is ultimately known for her sense of balance, whether it is faith, whether it is family, whether it is the profession of local government management. All of those things weave in and describe our guest and my friend, Michael Wilkes. Michael, welcome to AuthentiCity FM.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you guys tonight. This will
Well,
be fun.
it's going to be great. So one of the things we do early on is we give you a chance to describe yourself and say, like, well, how did you come to arrive in this chair? Give us your local government professional journey. How did you start? How did you end? How did you come to arrive in this chair?
Yeah, actually a great story. So, when I was a kid, I'm very fascinated by, politics and all that kind of stuff. So I did, as I was growing up, my first political office was in the sixth grade when I was president of the sixth grade city council, and just kind of went from there and was involved in student government when I was in high school, went to college studying political science. My intention at that point in time was to get into politics. And so I was going to go to law school. Decided when I finished college that it wasn't quite ready to go to law school. I thought, you know what, let's take a little detour here, spend some more of mom and dad's money on a master's before I go to law school. Because, hey, education's good. And so I decided I'd go get a master's in public administration. And honestly, while I was working on my public administration master's everything just kind of clicked. I mean, it really was like the safe thing, just everything beginning to click. And I was like, man, this is really it, because I get enough of the politics stuff and understanding politics and being in the politics game to satisfy that desire. But then I became fascinated with leadership and all that components of being a city manager, and so that kind of began my journey. Unfortunately, I didn't really have an opportunity to do an internship or anything like that when I was going to graduate school. So I was the guy. I came out of graduate school and I was like, hey, I have a master's. Who is ready to hire me? Well, unfortunately, no one was. I lived in the South. I was born and raised in the South. And so I was in Atlanta at the time. And so I applied for a job in Jackson County, Oregon, which is just above the California, Oregon line. And this guy, right, Paul Steinbrenner, I'll never forget him. He's the county manager. He wrote me this really, really nice rejection letter. Hey, you're not qualified for this job, but we do have a measly internship that if you'd like to apply for that, feel free. So, by the way, we won't pay your airfare unless you get the job. So I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So applied for that, got the job, and It was a year-long internship and really kinda set me on my path because, I did 3 stints for the full year. I'm really big. All my intern programs that I ran were like that, a full year deal. So I got some experience with the sheriff's office, some experience with the airport, and some experience in the budget office in the county manager's office. And for me, again, things clicked, and I was like, this finance thing, this budget thing is really where I want to chart my path because when I got to be a manager, I wanted to understand the budget. I didn't want to have somebody that's telling me what our budget looks like and translate and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to understand the budget, understand the importance of the politics of budget and all that kind of stuff. So I went to work for the city of Eugene as a budget analyst. A couple of years there. Then I went to back to Georgia in Gwinnett County. I was the operating budget manager of Gwinnett County at the time, one of the fastest growing counties in the country, and kind of worked my way up in that organization for 6 years. Got to be the assistant county manager there and then kind of said, I'm ready. And so my first city manager job was Alpharetta, Georgia. And again, at that point in time, one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Really kind of cut my teeth there and had a friend in Atlanta that was really good friend of the family that had been from Leawood, Kansas, which is a couple of cities over from where I'm at, right on the state line south of Kansas City. Called me up one day and he said, hey, there's this town out here called Olathe, Kansas, and they got a city manager's job open. You ought to come apply. And I'm like, hey, so I did some research and I was also that guy. You talk about metrics. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But I was that guy that had the thing on my office that was my career goals. I will be a city manager of a major metropolitan suburb of 100,000 by the time I'm 40 years old. Boom, that was it. And so at 39 years of age, I became the city manager of Olathe, Kansas, which at that point in time was at 97,000 population. So I said, check. so, yeah, so and then 27 years later, I retired. And, that's the weird thing too, boy. I did not come to Olathe, Kansas, thinking that I was going to finish in Olathe, Kansas. I really thought that it would be, a place that I was at for a while. If you don't count Eugene, I was in Gwinnett for 6 years. I was in Alpharetta for 6 years. And, so I thought, okay, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. And we'll see what happens. But the job was so challenging for me. It never got boring. We continued to grow the organization, the culture, the excellence we were able to achieve, all the brand things that we did. It just never got boring. And so one day I woke up and I'm like, holy cow, I've been here for 25 years, and it looks like I'm going to finish here unless they fire me. And yeah, so my last day was January 31st of this year. Longest tenured city manager in the history of Olathe, Kansas, and it was awesome. It was a great run. I cherish every bit of it. So yeah, so that was me.
Well, I appreciate that, and I often in my own organization will hold up Olathe as an example of a really well-run organization. So that is a tribute to
Thank you.
you, and I know you, and you will say that is also a tribute to your team because you don't do things
Absolutely, every
alone, and so
council, everything. So
yep. And so we actually met. Our first probably interaction took place in a group called the Alliance for Innovation. And I don't want to date myself, but it was probably 13, 14 years ago. We first got a chance to meet. So now you've got a new gig, Michael. What are you doing and how did you get that job?
yeah, so actually, I go back even further. When I first got to Olathe, we had one section of the organization at the time was called Municipal Services, which is kind of public works ish. They were a member of this group called the Innovation Group, which was kind of the precursor of the Alliance. And so I got to be familiar with the Innovation Group. Then it became the Alliance. When I was in Atlanta, I was good friends with a lady named Peggy Maris, who was at that time the city manager in Decatur, Georgia, and got to be good friends with Peggy. And so one day I'm minding my own business, and I get a phone call from Peggy saying that we have a spot open on the board for the Alliance for Innovation, and I want to nominate you. And I was like, okay, tell me more. So yeah, and I was fascinated with the mission of the organization. Of course, we'd been a member for a while and had gotten a lot of services from them. So got on the board. Boy, you're again dating me, but I think around the middle of 2000, so 2005-ish, 2006-ish, I was on the board till the switch over with SGR, which I think was about 2020, something like that. So I was on the board for probably 15 years, had a couple of stints, chairman of the board. And, I love the Alliance. I just met a lot of really, really cool people and, people that were mentors of mine, people that then I got to, mentor myself, so really great. It's been, really a part and parcel of what I achieved, I think, and what our staff achieved in Olathe. So this fall, when I got a phone call saying, "Hey, do you think you'd be interested in being the president and CEO of the Alliance now?" I was like, yeah, let's talk about it. So yeah, it's been so I'm 2.5 months in now. I will say this, and this, Mike. I started February 1st, and I'm 2.5 months away from the most important event that we do, which is Transforming Local Government Conference in Dallas, and I'm like, so it's been a whirlwind, but it's been a lot of fun.
So, Michael, I love your story. I love the excitement that you have in your voice as you tell your story, because it clearly has been such a fulfilling career, and you're now in another amazing opportunity that's going to test your skills in a completely different way. And just as an aside, there really is nothing better than getting a phone call from Peggy Maris telling you anything about anything. So
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. But I want to pull on some of the things that you were talking about relative to your career path, because there is a common line between many of the places that you worked, whether it was Gwinnett County, whether it was Alpharetta, whether it was Olathe, and that is you were in places that were growing at a breakneck pace. And speaking as an individual who leads a community that has been pretty much the same population for the last 60 or so years, um, being in a place that is constantly in a state of change and growth is a completely different experience than a place that is very stable and typical. Right? Those days don't vary very much for me. What is there something that attracted you to those places because they were growing, or did you just happen to find yourself there? And when you were there, what was the experience of working in a community that was always getting bigger and growing growing to greater?
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil. I don't know that I knew that about myself until I got in it. Um, but I had a staff member one time in Olathe early on who called me a tinkerer. That was his word. And so that I think, and I think that's true about myself, right? And I very much saw myself as a change agent, and so there's this adrenaline junkie piece of me, that tinkering, that always wanting to be under the hood, always wanting to, can we get better? Can we eke out, one more little bit of performance excellence? All that stuff, I think then kind of it just fit with me for where my career path ended up taking me, because what I know from myself now at my age and my career, I don't think I would have performed well in that kind of situation because for me, it's just always, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What are we chasing today? How are we tweaking the organization? All that stuff is just really kind of what fueled me in my career and kind of made me the person that I became. I wouldn't have it any other way. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't. And man, there are so many times. I hired this one guy one time from a neighboring community that had gotten fired. He was a city manager and he'd been there 22 years. And so he got fired. And so I picked him up as an assistant. And so we're just going, man, we're cranking. It was early 2000s. We're cranking. So he comes into my office one day and he goes, "Michael, I think we got to slow down. I think we're going too fast." I'm like, "We're not slowing down and we're not stopping. So we're gonna keep going." And so, I mean, I say all that to say, are there times when you have to ease off the pedal a little bit? Absolutely, because you can burn your people out, and you certainly have to keep your finger on the pulse of how things are going. But, I guess the flip side is one of my messages always in Olathe certainly was, change is a part of who we are. So, and I think if you view change in that way, that's very different from looking at change as something that's happening to you and you're having to react to it. No, change is just part of what we are and part of who we are as an organization. And we're gonna deal with it. We're gonna adapt. We're gonna figure it out, and we're gonna move forward. So, and now I'm doing that with the alliance.
Still stuck at 27 years. I wrote that down, which is
Okay,
just incredible. So, congratulations on
thank
such an
you.
extraordinary career. On the show, we often talk about the Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation and how this industry is actually only two. So, I started my career in Goodyear, Arizona, and worked with a lovely, talented woman by the name of Kim Bradford.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, as you're talking about kind of that fast growth, I started in Goodyear in 2003. Phoenix was just on the rise. And I think, and this is what I want to get your perspective on, the things we were working on in 2003, 2005 are the things that have happened now in the last few years. And so these industrial parks that we were planning, or the infrastructure, or the neighborhoods, or the annexations, all of these very long range strategic things that had no instant gratification. You had to have elected leaders who saw the long horizon, are all happening now. And I suspect over 27 years in Olathe, you actually got to see so many of the things you started come to fruition, which is not always the case in the city manager's chair.
Right. Right. That is a great perspective. And it's kind of it was one of the things that again was very fulfilling. So, on my I remember I was telling you about my career goals thing, right? So one of my things was as I was coming up through Gwinnett County and then in Alpharetta, I didn't really have the opportunity to do it in Alpharetta because I didn't have the council that wanted to do it. But in my brain, I always wanted to be in an organization where we could do a strategic plan, a forward looking strategic plan, and then work towards accomplishing that plan and have metrics based on that plan, have measures, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what I wanted to do. So one of the reasons I took the job in Olathe was because I had a council that was very, I'll use the word progressive, not in the terms of politics today, but a very progressive, forward-thinking city council that really wanted to change the dynamics of Olathe, Kansas, and a lot of really talented people in the organization. So one of the things I started immediately was we got to get it. They didn't have a strategic plan. We were growing so fast. And I'm like, we got to have a plan for how we're going to deal with all this stuff. So we did our first strategic plan in the year 2000. It was called Olathe's Vision for 2020. And so I will tell you, I made, and Susan Sherman, who was long-term assistant city manager, deputy city manager for me, now is the city manager in Olathe. We spoke at ICMA after 2020, and it was really cool because I sat, what you're saying, I sat up there saying, how many city managers get to say, I started one strategic plan, finished it 20 years later, and now we're starting another one for the next 20 years. And that I just thought was cool. I mean, I just, again, I felt like that was such an honor and an opportunity for me to be a part of that kind of thing was just incredible because, yeah, and I'll say this too, man, I've told a lot of people this in my career, um, because this goes back to, I did not come to Olathe, Kansas thinking that I would be there 27 years. But you know what? Having been in Olathe for Kansas for 27 years, I can't imagine having not been in Olathe, Kansas for 27 years because the things that we did, man, I used to call it all the time with our staff. It's about a journey, man. Some of the things that we did take a lot of time to do. And you can't just go in there and go, hey, I'm going to be here in 3 years and I'm going to tear everything up and, walk away. In retrospect, that's not who I am, right? And so it's been really cool. It's fun to look back on your career and go, oh, that makes a lot of sense now. I'm not so sure I would have, charted that out that way in 1999 when I first went there, but you know, that's how it's turned out. So it's been really, really, really cool. So
Well, I appreciate that, and I said I've heard some of these stories, and I know a little bit of your story of Olathe, so I do appreciate that, and you are being your authentic self. So on AuthentiCity FM, that's what we encourage. I saw you just take a drink, which has University of Alabama on that. And so one of the things that I know about you is that uh, you often take initiative on things just on your own and just get things started. And I know that there is a great story about how you met the great Paul Bear Bryant, University of Alabama football coach. And I think our audience deserves to number one, hear the story, but also gain a little bit insight of what does it take for a kid to meet probably at that point the most famous football coach in the country.
yeah. Yeah, so that it's so I do this I do a leadership talk and 10 points on leadership and I talk about the preciousness of other people. And I think that's incredibly important in leadership. And so the example that I use is this story about Bear Bryant. And so I went to the University of Alabama my second year of school. I was one of those kids that started school. I started college when I was 16, then turned 17. Yeah, I went to community college for a year and then I went to Alabama. So I was in the band, I played in the band. Bear Bryant, at that point in time, that was 1978, 79. That was my first year. And Bear Bryant was on the way to 315. If you know anything about football and that achievement, he was on his way to 315 wins. And this was when school started before Labor Day. My dad's birthday is September the 6th. And so that's my dad and I have always had an awesome relationship. So I'm there. I'm a sophomore. I'm at band camp. My dad's birthday's coming up. And how much money do I have as a sophomore in college? Zero. So I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to get my dad for his birthday? So my dad's a big Alabama fan, born and raised in the state of Alabama. And so I'm thinking, and of course, again, you put yourself back when you're, 17, 18 years old, right? You can do anything, anything. You can do anything. You're untouchable. And, so I'm like, I know what I'm going to do because it's free, right? I'm going to go to Bear Bryant's office and I'm going to get an autographed picture of Bear Bryant. I'm sure he's got, probably they got a drawer. They just pull them out of the drawer, they sign it, they give it to you. How hard can this be? Now, again, doing that with Nick Saban would be another thing but I after band camp one day, I went to the athletic department. I actually got in to the office. So I go in there and I sit down, and there's this nice lady, and she said, I tell her what I want. And again, I'm kind of surprised because I'm thinking when I tell her this, she's just going to pull it out of the drawer and give it to me. But she says, just a minute. And she goes in this door and closes the door behind her. And I sit there. She comes back out with the words that shocked my brain. She said, "The coach will see you now." Okay, now here's another thing. I'm one of those guys was a proverbial late bloomer when I was in school, right? So when I was 17 years old, I looked like I was 12, right? And so I was probably all of about 5'3" and about 105 pounds soaking wet. So I could do absolutely zero for Bear Bryant, zero. There, as much as I would have wanted to, right? I couldn't. So I'm shocked. She says, "The coach will see you now." So she ushers me into this room, which is, mahogany everywhere on the walls, trophies everywhere. And so he's sitting behind this big old desk with these two leather chairs on the other side. And he stands up, he comes out, and he gets one of those chairs and he puts it over on the side of his desk, right? And he asked me to sit down. So I sit down. I mean, my eyes are like, and so I sit down. He's chatting with me, asking me about how long I've been in school, how long do I like it, blah, 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 how long I've been an Alabama fan. So anyway, long story short, he asked me what I wanted, and I told him. I said, it's my dad's birthday on September 6th, and he's a big Alabama fan, and I'd like to have an autograph picture of you. So he signs it, and it says to Jerry Wilkes. Okay, wait, hold on. Can you see that? Okay, so that's it. I just thought about that while I was sitting there talking. All right, so now here's the funny part. What did I not get before I left his office? One for me, right? So did not get one for me. So this has always been in my dad, who is still alive, 90 years old. And finally, they moved 3 years ago. And I said, "Look, I don't know what you're going to do with that, but that's mine when you get finished." But I was probably in there for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, felt like 10 hours. And so part of the reason I tell that in my story is because, again, what I say is, I could do nothing for Bear Bryant, right? But Bear Bryant knew that by taking 10 minutes with this, punk kid who worshiped the ground that he walked on, the ripple effect of that experience for me was felt through my whole lifetime. And like I say, when I do my leadership talk, how many times do you think I've told that story, and it's because he took the time, and he didn't need to do that. He probably didn't have that 10 minutes, right? And so again, as leaders, it's incredibly important, the ripple effect that we can have on people's lives by just taking the time to engage with them, right? And that's what he taught me in that story. So yeah, that's my story. And you got to see the picture.
So I think part of the important part, and maybe you don't see it from your own lenses, it took a lot of courage to do that and ask too, though, right? I think so often in life, and we've talked about this, whether it's our own kind of psychoses that we have, but just making the choice to go ask is something probably very few people probably do, because they think he's too busy, or, oh, I'm not important enough, or any of that. And from a local government lens, I think we focus on the loud voices a lot. And so often people that come into our circles who have the courage to ask are wildly surprised that someone's willing to listen, and usually willing to work with them to solve whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I think one of the things I've always um, tried to do in my career is when somebody talks about something, I go, my answer would be, okay, why not? Let's try it. Let's try it. You know, so
So, Michael, I want to dig in a little bit on what a 27-year tenure looks like, because I had a former supervisor who was the village manager for 20 almost 28 years. I think we probably collectively, on two hands, can think of those folks in this profession who have managed a community for that long. And there are so many reasons why somebody doesn't stay for that long. And you've given us some good reasons about why you did. But I'm curious, you managed over some of the most dramatic events that could have taken place, right? Whether we're talking about the extreme optimism of the early aughts, followed by the Great Recession, followed by more with less, the constancy of government must constrain, but please make sure you're doing more and more and more all at the same time, all the way rounding out into COVID and the after effects of that. That's a unique vantage point to have been sitting behind the same desk and leading the same community. And obviously, Olathe in 1999 versus 2026, not the same place. And you weren't the same person either. But what was it like to kind of ride that roller coaster of unique experiences in this profession?
Well, I guess, Phil, one of the things I'd say right off the bat is kind of what I said a few minutes ago. That's part of why I stayed 27 years ago, because each one of those was a new challenge to face, and a new new lessons to learn. And I could go over each one of those, but golly, we were in the aughts, as you said. I mean, we were adding ridiculous numbers of people to our budget every year, just trying to keep up. And then all of a sudden, you get to the Great Recession, and now we're talking about laying people off, and what do we do to keep, and we went through that stuff, and I mean, each one of those things was a growing experience for us. But let me say this, kind of in answer, I think, to your question. Those challenges, I think, are part of what made me who I am as a manager, and what made the community who it is. I had an incredibly supportive city council. And so one thing that we haven't really talked about, which I think is relevant to the story of me being there 27 years. In 2020, we lost our mayor. He passed away. It wasn't related to COVID. Heart issues, and he passed away. He'd been the longest tenured mayor in the history of Olathe. He became the mayor in 2001. I got here in 1999. He was on the council when I got here, became mayor in 2001. All right. 7 people, 7-person city council. In 2020, when that mayor passed away, if you count him, 5 of the 7 people that had hired me 21 years earlier were still my bosses. So that is incredibly relevant. And I would also argue that the organization had a lot to do with that tenure. So a couple of things just to talk about, because some of the things that happened. So when I first got there in 1999, we had 2-year terms for our city council, right? And that was incredibly disruptive to an organization, to a community that's growing fast, because it did not promote long-term views of anything, right? And so they were always just worried about getting reelected. So we did a charter change in 2001, and instituted 4-year terms, completely changed the dynamic of this community. I would argue was probably the most important thing that we did in the 27 years I was there, because it revolutionized how the council viewed their jobs. So that was a big thing. The second thing that was huge for us was in 2000, right when I started, I was very fortunate. There was a company here in Olathe, still here, called the ETC Institute. And so some people that are listening to the podcast may have a familiarity with the ETC Institute. They're huge now. But when in the year 2000, Chris Tatham, who runs ETC now, was the son of the mom and dad that ran that company. And it was just kind of a measurement company. Chris went to Princeton, came back home, and kind of had a different thought about where ETC ought to go. Called me up on the phone one day and said, "Hey, I want to do this thing called Direction Finder." And I was like, "What's Direction Finder?" And he goes, "Well, I want to measure performance. I want to measure citizen satisfaction." And I'm going, "I am all about that. Let's do that." And so we beta tested that in the year 2000, started it. And it became part of who we are. And we did it every once a year for a long, long time. And then I went to Chris one year and I said, "Chris, we can't, doing it every year is not good enough for us, because by the time we get the results, we make a change, then it takes us a full year to figure out if it's working, and then another year to figure." I said, "I want to do it every quarter. We're going to do it every quarter. And we're going to ask different questions." So we started doing that. And one of the questions we ask is we ask about our city council, but we also ask, what are the priorities for the community, right? And then how much do you value your tax dollars? Well, those are really important questions for us in terms of how much our residents trust us, right? Because nobody likes paying taxes, but I can tell you in Olathe, Kansas, particularly over the last 10, 12 years, our trust issues for value for tax dollars are over twice the national average. And they're doing thousands of these surveys all over the country. Well, that builds up and basically the other thing is we would do this loop. We ask the citizens what they want. They give us their priorities. We feed those into our budget. Then after we do it, we ask them, "How did we do?" It just becomes a big circle for us. And so that built up a lot of trust. Well, I can tell you, over those 21 years where I had 5 of the same bosses, the 2 people that were there didn't get beaten in an election. They chose not to run anymore. And so the value, if you will, of those seats and those people on city council and how people viewed them from the citizenry was incredibly strong. I mean, their ratings were in the 98, 97, 98, 99 percentile. That all was part of what we built in the community. And it kind of goes back to your question in a tangential way. I mean, that's part of why it was fun to do it for 27 years, and part of why we were able to do, from fast growing to cut back in 2008, and then, trying to bring that back, and then going through COVID and all that kind of stuff, because we had an incredibly high degree of trust built up in our community. And so, I know that's something that people are dealing with all over the country. Managers are dealing with that all over the country, is the loss of that, because it seems now that, the lack of trust at the federal level and lack of trust at the state level is beginning to creep down into at the local level. And I think that's incredibly challenging for managers.
It's almost like you had listened to the podcast, because we talk about system change and actually breaking old systems that don't serve us well. We talk about disruption. And so everything you've just said, sort of like we talk on the show a lot about getting goosebumps, right? The last little bit about is just like, right. It induces goosebumps because it's exciting when we don't do glamorous work. We do things that are slow, grinding, but it's change management, and it's slow and it's methodical. So I appreciate that you mentioned right systems change and disruption. But I know Corey's got a question.
It's like you have ESP. So the idea of citizen surveys, which we have all been on kind of the contract side of, I think it's fascinating because a year, and Davenport had 2-year terms. So I was having trauma flashbacks as you're talking about that. They're still 2-year terms, and there are 11 of them. So yeah, it's a good time. But as social media ramps up, right? So if you go back to 2000, the print media and the TV media in a market of that size, very influential in what citizens knew about, believed, all of those things. And so the citizen survey feedback loop was really experiential through those lenses. But as social media really ramps up in the late 2010s into what it has become since, I think the feedback loop gets a little broken because instead of it being professionally led by data scientists, it's community led by a few loud voices. In many, many markets, the local media's gone or is bare bones. And so I'd love your perspective on how being innovative in that early era, h- what that looks like through this change and innovation of, trust is just a very different thing because the institutions have changed.
Yeah. I think part of what we were able to achieve in Olathe, and it was a lot of hard work. I mean, we had incredibly talented people in our comms area. And, I think I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall early, and we went from when I first got there, we had APIO, and so I kind of this was back when Clinton was president, right? And I used to watch George Stephanopoulos on TV, and I was like, I want that guy. I need that guy. I don't need the PIO. I need that guy. So we went out and found that guy, and then we just started growing our comm staff, and so they're incredibly, incredibly talented. And we lived through all the things that you're talking about. I mean, when I first got to Olathe, the Kansas City Star was a big deal in Kansas City. We had a local newspaper that was a daily newspaper. They hated everything that we did. And, slowly but surely, all that kind of stuff just kind of has gone by the wayside. And then you wake up one day and you are the voice that people are getting their information from about your community. And I have always felt like that is an incredibly important burden on us as professionals to do that right. Okay. And not abuse that, because now that is power, right? And sometimes people abuse that power. And so I think it's incredibly important that we give them the information that they need to make good decisions and have good information about the efficacy of their local government um without um spinning them, if you will. And so, that's a challenge. And I think that's been it was a challenge for us sometimes. And, we got to always uphold the North Star, and this is what we're doing, and this is the right thing. Right. So, but having said all that, and then I get back to your question, I guess certainly what has worked for us, and I can't say that this works for everybody, but because we are so intentional about customer service and the value of customer service and our engagement of our citizenry, and we go above and beyond to try to make sure we're engaging them in decision making. And so because of that, when you get right down to it, the people that are the loudest voices in social media are, the vast, vast, vast minority. And to be perfectly honest, the best people to combat those people it's not us. The best people to combat those people are all the other citizens that believe that what we're doing is the right thing and that we're spending money wisely and we're doing, blah, 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 blah. When you get some outlier piling on Facebook or X or whatever, I mean, we have always made it a point. We don't go toe to toe with people on social media. We do not do that. Never have, never will. Right. But what happens is other people will come on and go, yeah, but I was at the council meeting the other day and blah, 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 blah for you. And that's the best way to combat those people, because they really are in the minority. A lot of times they're just trying to make a name for themselves or whatever. And so that's kind of how we dealt with them, and been relatively successful at it for a while.
So, Michael, I'm a big fan of the ETC Institute. We've been using them since 2015 to do our every 4-year community-wide surveys, and um, we have also enjoyed really amazing results. And what's interesting as kind of a counterbalance to your experiences, so I've been in my role as the village manager now for 13 and a half years. Um, for the last 4 years, I have existed in the organization without any of the individuals who hired me, and what I think all what and I think it ties exactly back to what you're pointing to, is that yes, you had very stable elected officials. I have had a lot of turnover in elected officials, but there has been a constant that the elected officials trust and believe in the form. They trust and believe in the staff and the team that's been built. And that doesn't happen by accident, right? The fact that Olathe was as successful as it's been is a testament to a lot of things, but it's also a testament to particularly the commitment of your team in delivering, right? The customer service doesn't happen by accident. The fact that people respond to a community survey in such a positive way, and we've been recipients of the Leading the Way award
Yep.
the last couple of times. It blows my mind sometimes. Our last survey was in 2023, just post pandemic. I was preparing myself for a big drop in how everybody felt, and in fact, we found ourselves on the upswing. And that again isn't because people aren't paying attention. It's the exact opposite. It's that they feel heard, they feel responded to, they feel like they have a voice. And we have such an important role in the city manager's seat to make sure that that is the vibe of our organization, the vibe of our community. But my goodness, having the right people, to your point, having the right PIO or team of PIOs, having the right leaders in your operating departments who recognize the importance and value of their service to the broader community, is what brings those numbers in. It's not a fluke.
Totally.
um, and it requires a lot. And I have no doubt in my mind that you assembled an amazing team, but they also looked up to you to make sure that they were pointed in the right direction. And um, as I would say this, having worked in communities in the past where we've had incredibly stable boards who have served 20 plus years in their roles, sometimes mayors who have served 25 plus years as mayor. Sometimes what those communities get is a little too cautious and comfortable, and so it sometimes takes a person who's willing to say, I know that's how we did it 20 years ago, and it certainly worked then, but we got to try it a different way. Did you have a path that you would take if you found that you were seeing things a little bit differently than your elected officials, so that you could help to move the organization down a different path?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to my philosophy about relationships with the council a little bit. I was always a firm believer that relationships between individuals on the city council and me are incredibly important. Number one, to be just gut level selfish. Um, if you know me and you know my kids and I know you and I know your kids, and we meet all the time, it's a lot harder to fuss and fight and fire me than it is if you don't know me and I'm just the bureaucrat that sits at City Hall and you never hear from. So I met privately with each and every council member every month. They got a call from me every week on the agenda, where we talked about stuff that was going on in the agenda and all that kind of stuff. So just and honestly, the other piece of it is because of those relationships, at any given time, I would be willing to have bet you any amount of money you wanted to bet me on my ability to forecast where the council was going on any particular issue. And because I knew them, I knew them right here, not just right here, not right here. I knew them right here. So when I got there in 1999, Olathe had been through um, 3 city managers, 4 city managers in about 5 years. A lot of disruption, a lot of chaos, a lot of fussing and fighting with the council. So the council that hired me, 5 of them were fairly new in the last 2 years. And their deal was no more circus. We need to run this place like a business. We need to change our brand. We need to change our image. And no more fussing and fighting in public. And so I have always been an advocate of um it's not about rubber stamp, it's not about anything like that, but people don't look at city councils fussing and fighting on TV or on the web and go, gosh, that is a really effective local government. I want to be there. No, they don't. So we always did the fussing and fighting behind the scenes, and and it was a well-oiled machine in public. And so because of that, so if I knew, back to your question, kind of, Phil, if I knew that I don't have 4 votes to do something that I felt like we needed to be doing, it doesn't go on the agenda, because I am not going to put myself and the organization in a position of having something that I believe is incredibly important to the future of this community get voted down 4-2, 5, or 4-3, 5-2, whatever. Right. So I wouldn't put it on the agenda, and I would work individually with the people that I knew that I needed the votes until I had the votes. And then when I got the votes, I bring it forward. Right. I get the whole, uh, dichotomy between politics and administration and all that kind of stuff. But my personal experience as a city manager, if you're not absolutely just as politically smart as everybody on your city council, then you're doing a disservice to your local community.
So, Michael, I have to say, so right, there is a school of city management that has this philosophy and this teaching. I was brought up in it as well. I had some terrific mentors and friends who sort of said, right, like it is, it is the art of what's possible, and there's nothing glamorous. You work it. You talk to your council. You know where they're at. You do the things that are going to move yourself forward, in a way. And so I always appreciate that perspective, and I don't think a lot of our associations teach that methodology or that kind of that philosophy. I think it's a disservice. I adopt the same in my own community, and we've had a fight with our county for approximately 50 years, and it's ongoing. And I said, well, what if we tried this instead? Because I come from that mindset, and the county and our council was like, well, yeah, we could do that. And so it's sort of transformed for our whole conversation. So that's a longer story for another day. But I'm going to transition just a little bit. So you have talked a lot about, you are now the CEO and president of the Alliance for Innovation. It has historically been kind of called the Rebel Alliance, right? It's this little group that sort of does good government behind the scenes, and spurs innovation, and tries to, right, move the profession ahead. Um, you talked about your origins for it. Where do you see the Alliance for Innovation going? And what are you sort of, right? You're a great builder of community. Like, what are you hoping to see next in your role as CEO and president? Why should an organization curious about innovation in government want to be a member?
Yeah. That is a great question. Um, So, one of the things I would say, so first of all, let me say this publicly. AFI and myself now as the president and CEO of AFI and members of AFI owe an incredible debt of gratitude to Ron Holyfield and SGR for keeping the Alliance for Innovation alive. And I mean that with everything I'm saying, because I unfortunately I was the chairman of the Alliance when the time came that we had to do something different, and Ron literally took the Alliance on life support and has given it life for 5 years. I view my role now, and we have a brand new board. We'll be introducing those people at TLG. We got a great, great board. Mike's on the board. Really happy to have him on the board. And so, but we have a great board. And part of what I like about the board is we got people like Mike with experience with AFI from back years, and then we have people that have really very little experience with AFI. And so I think part of what my job is, this is the way I look at reinvigorate AFI, is exactly what you said. When the Alliance started, the whole idea of the Alliance was, look, the profession, city management, needs people that are willing to be on the front lines of charting the path for what tomorrow looks like. And Corey kind of said this earlier when she was talking about some of the things that if you're it and it sounds like she was in one of those organizations where you're doing things today that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, you're sitting in some conference at ICMA and you're going, yeah, we did that 10 years ago. That's really cool. But that's exactly the role that AFI had. There are going to be people that will be on the tip of the spear that are going to be doing it. And then you're going to have 5,000 people that will do it later, right? Once it's been widely adopted, they're going to do it. And so that's the role that we play at AFI. And, the cool thing about AFI today to me is, man, holy cow, we are at a place in time when, I mean, the amount of tech firms and the stuff that's being thought of and imagined and conceptualized that helps us in local government. I mean, one of the cool things I was able to do right before I left was I funded the Drones' first responder program in Olathe. So to me, and I told my chief, I said, look, I want to do this. I want to do it, and I want to do it before I'm gone, because to me, drones for first responder will 10 years from now be just like, computers in their cars. It's going to be the same thing, right? Let's do it now. Let's get on top. And so anyway, all kinds of stuff like that. And the amount of tech that's out there, and we've got companies that want to talk to our members because our members are willing to be on the front lines of some of this stuff. So, my pitch to anybody is, man, if you're listening to this podcast and you're one of those guys like the people that are on this call right now, the people that are talking to me, and you want to be one of the people that are helping make things happen today that are going to be the norm 10 years from now, then you need to call me on the phone, or you need to send me an email on Michael Wilkes at transformgov.org. And we want to talk to you because I'll tell you this too, and Mike, you'll remember this. When I first got, I'll tell you, when I first got on the Alliance board in the mid-aughts, as Phil said, there were people on that board that, like, I was like, it was like being with Bear Bryant, right? I mean, these were some of the top, Jim Keene, Peggy Maris, we talked about. I mean, there were people on that board that I'm like, oh my word, these people are giants of this profession. I mean, they are paving the way. And to be able to sit with those people and learn from them and hear their stories and all that was part of what made the experience great for me. So again, same thing, man. If you want to be at the feet of some really cool people that are doing some really cool stuff and get an opportunity to talk with them and network with them and find out what's going on, man, you need to join because it's a great ride.
So let's pull at that a little bit. We are filming the week before TLG. So when this podcast goes live, you will be at TLG. But government likes to think ahead because of budget. So if someone's not going to see you in Texas next week, give us a little preview of what that conference will be like so that when they're doing their budget allocations for the following year, they can plan it already ready to go.
So just as a for instance, man, we've got our keynote speaker on Monday is a guy named Nick Kittle. I don't know if the people that are listening to the podcast are familiar with Nick, but Nick did some work for us out in Olathe. And the cool thing, and again, this could be a whole nother podcast by itself, but as a city manager, I ultimately and I always felt this way about the Alliance as well. I don't believe that you can be innovative as an organization and transformative as an organization if you don't create first a culture that enables and allows that kind of stuff to thrive in your organization. So I'm very much a culture leads to guy. And that's really what Nick is all about. He's got a book that's called Sustainnovation. And his whole point is you have to build culture to sustain innovation. And there's some of the stuff that so Nick's going to lead us off. That's going to be awesome. We got a lot of really, really good case studies, a lot of partnerships between tech firms and local governments that are instituting some really cool stuff. Got several things going on AI. So if you're interested in AI, you can still get to Dallas. We'll let you do a day pass or something. We got some stuff on how, I don't know if you guys know Housen Lee, but Housen's our futurist, and Rebecca Ryan's going to be there. She's got a couple of sessions. So it's that kind of vibe, I'll say this, and my big deal on TLG, especially as a man, the reason I wanted to go to TLG every year is because when I came home, my head hurt, right? Because it made me think. It challenged my thinking. It was a provocative thing, and that's really what we want to be as an organization, and that's what we want to have as a conference. We want to make you think, right? We want to make you a little bit uncomfortable. We want to make you think about what tomorrow looks like and how you can impact tomorrow.
Okay, so I'm going to say a couple of things. So number one, Nick Kittle was episode 10. So go back, listen, rewatch,
cool.
listen to that. Rebecca Ryan was a previous episode. She is one of our friends and icons in this profession. And so we have a fondness for her. So if you're in Denton, if you're in Coppell, if you're in McKinney, this is a day's drive for you guys. This is a no-brainer, and I'm going to send this to all my friends in all of those places. So it is a terrific conference. I wish I could be there. I remember the first time I got to go to a TLG, and I describe it this way, and I've said this for 15 years, right? It felt like home. And so if you're listening to this podcast, TLG will feel like home for you. So I just appreciate that you just mentioned all the people we've already had on this podcast so go back, re-listen, rewatch, and give us some feedback about who you want to see next on the episode. But Phil, I saw you pop on.
You did? I don't think that I actually popped on, but I do. I also want to express my regrets that I won't be at TLG either. I've gotten invitations from a few folks to try to get there both last year and this year. And of course, schedules have always gotten in the way, which is totally unfair. But I'm just going to put it into my calendar for 2027 and it'll happen. Michael, I think I always like to get into a little bit of the feeling part of the work. And I wanted to ask just the question about what it's been like for you to transition away from a seat that you sat in for 27 years You were a leader of a cutting edge organization, but with arguably a somewhat different set of mission outlines than you do today. How has what's been your favorite change from city manager to executive director?
That is a great question. It's funny. It's funny. I had my wife and I were at dinner with some friends the other day, and somebody was asking, well, how's he doing? How's he doing? And there, I'll say, before I give you that, what Holly said was, um, well, I'll just go ahead and tell you what Holly said was, you know what? He has always had a fairly unique ability to compartmentalize his life and flip the switch on and off. And that is true. So I am a guy that so like we hadn't really talked about this much, but I did not I've spent my entire 42-year career. I don't talk about work when I get home. Now I work at home, so it's a little bit different. Um, but I didn't bring work home with me. I about council meetings. I didn't talk about, any of that stuff. And so honestly, so part of what she said was he's been amazing to do that all his career. And she goes, you know what? I mean, when he walked out the door on January 31st, he walked out the door on January 31st. And I can't say necessarily, Phil, that well, it's been easier than I thought it was gonna be. How about that's about as honest as I can be, because to be perfectly honest, all through the fall, I announced that I was gonna leave in June, I think June the 1st. And so, I didn't know, man. I really didn't know. I was like, what is it going to be like to not be? I mean, I've been doing this for 27 stinking years. What's it going to be like to not be that guy anymore? You know? And, do I have this drive for power and authority that's going to mess up my brain when I walk away from it? And, I'm going to be kicking my dog or, um, and really honestly, and I never wanted, I did know this. The closer I got to retirement, the more I knew in my brain, I will not be the guy that shows up at city council meetings. I will not be the guy that's going to the coffee shop complaining about. I'm just not going to be that guy, right? I'm not going to city hall, walking around, seeing all my buddies or whatever. I'm just not doing that, and I haven't, and I don't, and I don't have any plans of doing it. And I will say this: this is hard. Here's the hard part. And I haven't figured out what to do with this. Okay. Um, so I was always weird. I say weird. Some people would say weird. I was always weird about relationships with people outside of work. Okay. So so here's what I mean by that. Um, People literally that I've known for 27 years, I know literally everything about them, right? I know their kids. I know I know, everything, right? But I've never been to their house. I've never, been I've never been to something socially with them. I just always kind of was the guy that drew that line, right? That said, that's a whole different. Again, it goes back to that compartmentalization thing. So I would very much consider those people incredibly close friends of mine, but not people that I socialized with. That's been the hard part, because when you walk away, what's that? And I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't totally figured that out yet, because, you know, again, what I don't want to do, I'll give you an example. I have had dinner with, so the guy that was the chamber president, right? He and I have known each other for 27 years. He's been with the Olathe Chamber of Commerce. He was the economic development director, and then he became chamber president and still doing economic development. We worked just like that for 27 years and doing a lot of stuff. We spent the last 5 years. Here's my one plug. Before I left, we spent the last 5 years working to get the Kansas City Chiefs headquarters in Olathe, Kansas. Boom, did it. So anyway, I've had dinner with him a couple of times since I left. And yeah, and again, it's weird because I've said to him, when I show up for dinner, I don't want to talk about the city. I don't want you to tell me how it's going. I don't want you to tell me how good it is, bad it is. I don't want to know. I just don't want to know. Don't talk to me about any of that. I want to talk about me and you, and I want to talk about your kids, and I want to talk about your hunting and, my motorcycle riding, and that's what I want to talk about, and so I'm still navigating that. But on the flip side, what you also said is, I have felt that being the president and CEO, getting the opportunity to work for the Alliance has been an incredible lifeline to me, because it allows me to continue to do all the really cool things that I really want to do. I'm not running the city, but I still, my toe is still in the water, right? I mean, and so that's been great for me.
So that was an amazing answer, and maybe you're not sure that it was, and I'm just here to tell you that it was, because it is. And I think everyone, and Corey's got some stories she can tell from the standpoint of making that change from one thing to something else. And I think you do have to turn off part of your brain, because it's programmed to work a certain way, and then you're not allowed to use it that way anymore. And that's a very difficult human thing to try to do, particularly when you've become so good at doing it that way for so long. And, I think we all wonder perhaps how our brains are going to work when not in the middle of the crazy all the time and something else comes. But I appreciate how authentically you just kind of owned your odd feelings around it, because I think that's such a human reaction to that transition in life from one thing to the next. And so I'm grateful for so many things that you said tonight, but particularly kind of the fact that you do still have your toe in the water, right? You do still have this way to be impactful to the profession, to help us who are trying to do things differently, perhaps see things that others are doing, to bring that mindset of innovation in a different way than you ever had the opportunity to before, perhaps even more broadly than you give yourself credit for yet, right? And I think that's the cool thing for you, perhaps from my vantage point, is that now you get to try something else, right? Try it differently, and help us all learn from you in a very different way. So congratulations to you for that transition.
Thank you.
Maybe transition's a good term to use, because I feel like this is a chance for you perhaps to flip that microphone around. We've been asking you a lot of questions. We always appreciate it when our guests start saying to us, hey, this is what I wanted to ask you. I've been thinking about this, and you haven't given me the chance because you keep throwing new questions at me. So, hey, Michael, the floor is yours. Mike Sable always likes to say, we will always answer the question. We will not guarantee a good answer, but we will guarantee an answer. So we'll throw it back at you.
A couple of things come to mind. It's funny because Corey was talking about courage earlier. I think it takes an incredible amount of courage to do what you guys are doing. So, I guess a generalized question about, kind of what got you guys in to doing this. And again, speaking to I guess, the courage that it takes to do that and kind of put yourself out there. And then second, kind of a follow up to that would be your, boy, you may not answer it. Well, you said this, your best guest and your worst guess.
So I'm going to go first because otherwise they will just bequeath the honor to me anyway. So I'm just going to do it anyway. So how we got started with the podcast, these two guys said yes to a silly question. So I left my position 2.5 years ago now. And you talked about how great Ron Holyfield is earlier. He was one of the greatest conversations I had in the early part of that transition, because my identity, and you both kind of alluded to this, was gone. All of my relationships were gone, and I didn't know who I was anymore. Ron and I had the most fantastic conversation. He gave me an hour of his time. We had the real conversation, all the things you would never say on air, but you can talk about with somebody who is as wise and thoughtful as he is. And that really helped. And so in many ways, this podcast started as a way for me to stay connected to the profession, because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up the second time around. I had been working on my doctorate. I studied turnover intentions in local government. For you, the answer is hope and optimism. That's what it takes, which isn't surprised, but it was fun to prove it statistically. And it was my chance to figure out what next looks like, because I knew next had to be different because of my family and my choices. And so how we started was I had a harebrained idea, which I am known to do, and these two were silly enough to say yes to me.
Cool.
As far as best or worst guess, I'm going to give a total up the middle answer. Is every guest has its purpose. And Mike and I were talking a little bit before we filmed tonight that sometimes we're not the audience for whatever the message we're consuming is, but someone else is. And I think we've heard with every single episode that we've filmed and produced that something meaningful came out of it for somebody who needed to hear that thing at that point. And that's great. There is no worst guess, because if you said yes to the three of us and stuck around with us for an hour and let us publish the conversation, like, that is an act of courage and bravery. And I'm going to be grateful every day of the week for that.
Cool.
So I'm jumping in before Mike can, so that he has to go last, because that's just too much fun for me. I would just like to say that this podcast, when we first started talking about it, I really didn't think it was real. I kind of thought it was just a joke that we were going to, shoot memes back and forth to each other about when we do a podcast someday, ha ha ha. And we never really actually will. And then we actually did. And what it has brought to me, and I've said this I think on the podcast, but I've also said it when this question gets asked, in a one-on-one conversation of why, is that I derive more than I think I give, from the standpoint of a once a week opportunity to provide myself a shot of optimism about why I love the work, and why the work has meaning, and why I want to be an ambassador for the profession that I have committed my career to. And I don't say that because I think that we have a monopoly on good ideas, or that we have the right blend for what the profession needs right now. But I would say the profession needs people who are willing to talk openly about the challenges and the opportunities and the concerns and sometimes the crushing weight of the work. And we often, and we talked about this in our last episode, we often talk about how we can't get people to join us, and to, hiring is getting harder, and how are we going to do that? And we're sure not going to do it if we don't talk about what it actually is. And I see this as an opportunity for us to say, we're going to give you we're going to give you the spectrum. We're going to give you the good. We're going to give you the difficult. We're going to talk about the stuff. And if that means that's inspirational to you, and you can't wait to become a city manager someday, great. If you say, you know what, that's not the right path for me, but there's something else in public service that is, I see that as a win as well. And so this is a chance for us, I think, to give give some life to some of the things that people are feeling and thinking and struggling with, and perhaps are uncomfortable saying out loud. And I don't think we say anything out loud that is all that earth shattering or groundbreaking, but we certainly do try to create a space where people can feel comfortable and confident. And Michael, I think you're a great example of somebody coming on, and you and I have never had never had the opportunity to have a conversation before we sat down to behind our computer screens and started that tonight.
Right.
And I think that speaks to what we really have the privilege and honor to do, which is to be able to dialogue so freely and comfortably with one another. So I would say, to Corey's point on the best worst guest, I am likely both the best and the worst guests that we ever have myself, depending upon what bizarre thing comes out of my mouth when Mike throws the microphone my direction and I am not prepared for it, because for maybe the last 30 or 70 or 160 seconds I've been thinking about something else, and then he's like, hey Phil, what do you think about that thing we just said? And I'm like, I don't have any choices here.
Right.
Okay. So I joke, but I think the three of us always seek to be a group of folks who can elevate the conversation through the guests that we bring in and some of the ideas that we have. And I would say we've never had a bad guest. We've only had opportunities for really thoughtful and exciting conversations. And so I just look forward to continuing that.
That's good.
So I've had the longest to think about it, and I'm going to give the poorest answer. So I will say, so and I've said this before, right? The basis of this podcast is it is rooted in respect for the practitioner of local government management. We are your peer in this, but we're also just surrounded by such talented people. And so if we can give a voice to talent, and so, right, our little bit is, right, real stories, bold ideas, better communities. That's why we get into this job. And so it is foundational to who we are. We call it authenticity because, like, we don't apologize for, like, we make great communities and we work at it every day. And sometimes you have to tell the story. And this is a platform, like, there's a lot of noise out in the world, and none of it none of it spoke to me. And it was like, we kind of talked about, like, there's just something missing, like, maybe we do it. And so it's just like, it was an idea, and then we kicked it around, and then we, like, well, if it's going to be an idea, we should probably schedule a time. And then we scheduled the time, and then we filmed an episode, and we're like, well, let's just do 10 and see how it goes, right? And it was like, okay, well, that was kind of cool. Like, let's do, right? Apparently, we're going to do 23 more, and then we're going to go from there. And there's two other things I want to say is, we're of a we're of a generation that's, like, known to be sort of cynical and independent and sort of Gen Xer. And it was like, we can actually maybe change the narrative. Like, there's a bunch of things that are broken in our governmental systems and how we work. And, like, if we can expose those broken things and say there is a better way, and the only way to figure it out is to do it together, like that seems meaningful if we can give light to the things that need to change. David Brooks has a book called The Second Mountain that, right, most of us spend our careers trying to just go up the trajectory and try to, grow, 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 grow. And then there's a moment where you're like, yeah, but it's not meaningful. And this feels meaningful because it is, right, for an hour and a half every week, we're talking about something that matters to somebody, and we're giving voice to things that often need to be said. And so, so I'll summarize by saying it is rooted in a profound respect for the practitioners of this work. Michael, you are in that list of people who we have a ton of respect for. You have been a mentor and friend to me for a really long time, and so, for the people who don't know who you are, I can promise you they're instantly like, "Oh, that guy's cool. I want to follow what he's doing." Because our guests are people that we have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for. And there isn't a best or worse, um, but it is always different than what I expected it to be when I get on. And that's what makes it sort of special. So, uh, those are really hard questions.
That's cool. That's cool.
So no, I
Well,
appreciate that.
I would say a tremendous amount of respect for you guys for what you do. Again, I go back to I would not have the courage to do what you guys are doing, and so I have a lot of respect for what you guys are doing, and again, all the things that you guys said. Boy, that I had a thought for almost every person as you guys were going around your thing. I feel the weight of what we do. It is a tremendous is an incredibly difficult and demanding profession, but at the same time, it is one of the most exhilarating and fulfilling and, um, all that that you I mean, who else I thought about this when I was retiring in the 6 months, in the fall. I was like, I found myself driving around going, "Yeah, I had a part of that. I had a part in that. I made that happen. I helped make that happen. We did that," and where else can you go and do that? I mean, what else can you do where you have an impact? I used to tell our employees, every day you go to work, 155,000 people in this community, it matters to them what you do and how well you do it. Every day, every day, every day, and what else can you do that has that kind of impact?
Well, that was a perfect segue into our last little bit. I mean, and I mean it. I mean, and I say this all the time, right? We get to build things that last for generations.
Yeah.
Our children and great grandchildren are going to use things that we touch, and it is magical, and it is important that we do it well. So there's two bits I'm going to say to you. So number one, we always give our guests an opportunity to say you're not just a city manager, you're not just CEO of the Alliance for Innovation, you're also Michael Wilkes, human. So what do you do at home to sort of, what's important to you at home holistically? And then the other bit is, uh, we give you the last word. We always honor our guests by giving them the last word. So, if you could close out with a couple of things. So, who are you outside of this professional environment? What sustains you and drives you? And then any last words that you have for us, we would be honored to hear from them.
Yeah, so Michael Wilkes outside of work, I'd say number one is my faith. My faith is incredibly important to me. It's driven me and been kind of again, the North Star, to me for my whole entire life. And, I think God's the one that led me into this profession, and he sustained me through the whole thing, and I give him honor and credit for everything that I've been able to accomplish and do in my career. And so number two is family. My family has always been incredibly important to me. I was one of the things I was thinking of as Phil was talking when I was in Alpharetta. I had a council member, and I was kind of new to being a city manager and all this kind of stuff. My wife and I had been married for 12 years, no kids. And so my wife's now pregnant at this time. And I had a city council member sexually harass one of our employees in the HR department. So I had to go through all that. Well, that just led to, him pounded on me at every council meeting and what a dirtbag I was, and I ought to resign and this and that and the other thing. And I think I was about 36, and again, no kids, and it was kind of that was my first career crisis. And I'm sitting there going, I'm fixing to have a child. Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And have my kids, listening to what a dirtbag their dad is, and their character impugned and all this kind of stuff. And I had a guy at my church. I was in a small group at my church. And so I was just kind of sharing with him one night the struggles I was having. And he goes, let me tell you a story. He said, you don't know this about me, but he said, my dad was mayor of a small town in South Carolina where we grew up. He said, my dad was mayor for 15 years. And he said, there's a lot of people that didn't like my dad, and the press didn't like my dad. But he said, you know what? I never doubted who my dad was, because I knew who my dad was when he came home. And your daughter's going to know who you are when you came home. But that kind of goes to what you're talking about, Phil. And I think all of it, so family. I diverted there, but family, very, very important to me, because I wanted my daughters, you know, I waited 12 years to have them. I love them. I wanted to be there for soccer games. I wanted to be there for cheerleading. I wanted to be there. I did not want to get to my daughter being 21, 22, 23 one day, walking out of the house and go, I never knew who my dad was. He was never there. And so I wanted to be present as a dad, present as a husband. And so that's important. I ride Harley Davidsons. I love my Harley, and that's really we got a group of people we ride with. That's what we do for fun. Love to travel. My wife and I did a retirement trip last fall. We did a Viking River cruise from Amsterdam to Basel, Switzerland. It was awesome. Highly recommend it if you ever get a chance to go. And so want to do that again. And so that's a little bit about Michael Wilkes, the other guy. And I guess this is what I'd leave you with. When I remember when I came to Olathe, my first retirement was a guy that had spent 35 years of his life mowing grass in the Parks and Recreation Department. And so they asked me to speak at his retirement. And I said, there is no greater honor than to give 35 years of your life in dedication and service to your fellow man. And that's probably what I'd say to leave you guys with that listen to this podcast. I don't care where you're at. I don't care what you do. I don't care what level you're at in the organization, but there is no greater honor than we have than to spend our lives in the service of our fellow man, and trying to make it better for them and better for their kids and my kids and your kids. And that's what keeps me coming back every day. So, and listen, I would also be remiss if I didn't say, I really, really, really heartfelt. This has been 500 million times more fun than I thought it was going to be. I'm deeply honored by you giving me the time.
The honor is shared. So thank you, Michael, for your career of service that isn't over, has only changed. Thank you for the words that you shared tonight. Thank you for your time and the willingness to be your authentic self with us. That's what we're all about here at AuthentiCity FM. We're grateful for the opportunity to have had the chance to dialogue with you tonight. So thank you. And everyone, we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again.